Welcome back. You are listening to another episode of the Keep the Change podcast, and shit, I'm fired up. I'm actually a little bit tingly, Mikey.
Same.
I feel like it's been so long.
It is. Well, when were we last here?
Oh, it feels like weeks.
Yeah.
Because we batched a lot, didn't we?
Yeah, I've already had 3 coffees, man. Like, I'm sweating a bit too much. It's all go.
I'm 260 milligrams deep.
Good.
So this should be a big day. We've got a Sunday of pods scheduled for the people out there. And we thought, why not start it off by revealing to everybody out there when the shit is truly going to hit the fan.
Yeah.
And you, Mikey, I think it's September, October-ish, but you tell me June, July.
Well, I've been saying June, July this year since the middle of last year, because of the interest rates on mortgages, basically. That's like the main data set that I look at. And they're starting to happen now, and we're seeing people be more worried about it. But when we go over the 50% mark of all those mortgages that are due to roll off in 2023 from 3 to 6 or 7% interest rates is June, July.
Yeah.
So I just took a guess, really.
Okay.
Just
nice.
my economic skill is, So like half of them are going to come due or past that point. So half the people are in the pain chamber, you know.
So as you've taught us for a long time now, you've been giving us heaps of warning. There's about $120 billion of debt that still needs to roll over onto a new interest rate.
Yep.
And 50% of that will happen in the first 6 months of 2023. And the second 50%, so 60 billion, will be in the back half.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you a story from this week. So I've got a client who do relatively well, right? Mm-hmm. And they've got a rental property. And that's the classic Kiwi business starter pack. When your business starts doing pretty well, take the profits from there, invest it into a rental. I'm like, hey, don't do that. Invest it back into your business. But anyway, story for another day. But their rate is about to go from 2% to 6%.
6.5%, yep.
And they do quite well. And they're not financially strained. And they said, we just need to speak to you. We'd just love to get your thoughts. We're thinking we might sell it. I'm like, really? I'm like, yeah, we just, can't believe the amount of rate interest that we're going to have to pay. And I'm thinking, this is interesting for a client that does quite well and they're not strained and they're thinking maybe we should sell. And I said, well, let's look at this in a different way. Because basically the interest is going to be another $2,000 per month. Mm-hmm. And I said, could you, let's go back to A, why did you buy this in the first place? And then B, what's that cost over 12 months? And can you accept if you pay $24,000 extra in interest than you currently are, that you're going to buy yourself a year to then make a different decision? Because in a year's time, if you've sold it, you could look back and go, damn, we regret selling this. Because this is subdividable, like all sorts. It's got potential. So
it's got possible good value in the future.
Yeah, and I'm like, your business can subsidise that $24,000 of interest, so that's where their income comes from, and you're going to buy yourself a year. And they were like, wow, when you put it like that, for $24,000 of interest, yes.
It's funny when you replace emotion with logic, eh?
Yeah.
And it's hard thing to train yourself to do, but it's really good at times like these.
Yeah. So it's not only impacting, first home buyers, etc. There's people that are questioning their financial setup because rates are effectively tripling or doubling for a lot of people, and they're wondering, what shall I change? Should I?
Yeah, well, I think that's a real thing is people that don't need to might step out anyway for a while. There's a certain part of me that thinks like someone who understands business and does it right in business will be looking at those numbers and be like, man, I'm just going to run this at a loss for ages. Like, this is a terrible business decision to keep. So a certain amount of that logic kicks in and you're like, why do I even own this? If I'm going to run a $24,000 loss for the next 3 years before it produces anything, it's a lot to make up on the other side.
Yeah.
And there'll be people out there. I've heard of, there's some stories of stuff that was bought for $2.5 million and sold for $1.5 million.
That's ugly.
And there's more coming, right?
So when we get to June, July, what's going to happen? What are we going to see?
You're probably right, because there's always a lag with this stuff, and it's probably going to be around that September, October time. But as all of this happens, I just feel like once the majority of that lending data is onto the higher stuff, you have to start seeing cracks in it. Like, we've already seen the Centrix reports like we talked about on one of the pods in last month. You can just see the trends of all those graphs. they're all rising, like arrears on mortgages, arrears on credit cards, buy now, pay later's at 10% arrears, like all of this stuff. And, you know, if you're going to take 25% of the mortgages and increase the cost of them by triple, like it's just the way I'm just looking at it logically. It's like surely something's going to happen.
Yeah, it'd just be the same as say your petrol price was going to triple this year, and you knew that it was going to happen. Your behaviour will change in the year at some stage.
Yeah,
and the more people that are paying triple, the louder it will get of this is unfair. What's happened here? But then some people will have prepared and planned for it ahead.
Yeah, some people are already set, and other people, there's a massive portion that can take the interest rate hike because there's been wage inflation and all this other stuff going on. But, you know, the other thing that can happen, and this isn't like alarming or anything, but the other thing that can happen is like if you leave it to the last minute, which most will do if they're in the pressure zone, then you have to sell it. It's not liquid because no one will want it. And then you get the price drop.
Even my client said to me, but we don't really want to sell because the market's not that great at the moment.
It's going to be worse.
But this client, they're onto it. So, and they said, we need to make a decision quickly. I was like, why is that? And like, because our rate rolls over on the 14th of March. And I'm like, why are we having a chat on the 10th then?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And
that conversation was always last year.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. So humans will always leave things till very late, right, to make some of these decisions. But also, like, I'm the same. I've got shares that are backwards, and I can't bring myself to sell them because I brought at the top, as you know.
Yeah, well, you left your money in Celsius too.
True. I'm just an out-and-out fucking idiot. Yeah, good point.
Yeah.
Gee, I hope Sharesies don't go under.
Yeah. Shit.
Praying for you.
Actually.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, on top of this, just this pure mortgage data that we're getting access to from the Reserve Bank now, I actually had a Zoom sort of meeting with other people, with Cam Baggery, who's the ex-ANZ economist.
Cam Bag guy.
Yeah, and I like him sort of the most out of all of the economists, probably because I agree with him the most. I'm biased.
Yeah.
He seems to have a little bit of a different view, which fits more with how I sort of think about things. So I took some notes, and it was pretty interesting because I think the biggest takeaway I had from it was that the playbook of the last 30 years is out the window, and the cyclone and the damage the cyclone's causing at the time that it's happened, with probably like a forecast of low period of growth and inflation, is real niggly.
Couldn't have come at a worse time.
Yeah. He was pretty bearish about it. Like he was saying, Grant Robertson's walking around saying that the repairs are $13 billion. And he's like, what actually happened is it put a spotlight on how poor our infrastructure could handle an event like that. It's $130 billion.
To really be
fix
in a,
it.
Yeah,
so
to be in a place that we can let that happen, and you know it's not as
there's
impactful.
always going to be damage from storms and things like that, but to have it happen and have that much of a big effect is a lot of poor decisions about where things are placed and
So it's $13 billion to fix it, but it's $130 billion to prevent it turning into a disaster again if it were to happen again, basically.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
So he's like, that's structurally inflationary.
Yeah.
Okay, so during this time when we don't really want inflation, we're trying to get rid of it, which it's just going to bake into the data. And you remember when Adrian Orr said, we're going to look through this with the OCR, we'd like you to as well. Not a chance.
No.
Like that's good luck.
Yeah.
You know, if we're going to do repairs above and beyond putting it back to how it was, it's going to be inflationary because that's how the system works, and it's going to put pressure on stuff, and we need resources, and we need people, and we need all of these things.
New carpet. We need new jib.
Even just the fact that like a construction company can go down there now and open and know that they're going to have work for 5 to 10 years, right?
Yeah.
So if they know that, they can build a pipeline and they can be like, right, let's hire people. Where are they? They're in Auckland. They're running out of work because, you know, no one's building any more new builds. So we're going to pay them. There's 70 grand up there. We'll pay them 85, bring them down.
Yeah.
And then it's like, boom, wages up, inflation.
Yeah.
More disposable cash. So like all of these things get stuck into the data, and I think he believes that interest rates won't come down until the end of 2024, maybe the start of 25. I was like, wow, that's a bit contrarian.
Mikey's, you said around 2022 they'll start coming back, right?
Yeah, end of
2023, sorry.
End of this year, start of 24, and he's saying, nah, bolt on another year to that.
Oh, man.
I think there'll be a bit of an event before then in terms of something breaking and then seeing what happens with that. But yeah, basically, that was pretty interesting. He reckons 6% mortgage rates all through next year.
And we have to remember that $13 billion, that figure's basically come from, this could be just as expensive to fix as what happened in Christchurch. So
when everything was half price.
Exactly. It was cheap. And so basically they've just then plucked that figure. Now, do you remember when we talked about the financial impacts of the storm up here in Auckland? And I said this will be $1 billion easy.
Yep.
And then the stories were all like, this could be 400 million, 500 million. And I'm like, we always undercook this. Read the other day, insurance claims in Auckland have just gone past $1 billion.
Yeah. It's going to be 2, man.
Exactly.
Yeah. So
people underestimate massively the cost of things. And I don't know how. Like transmission gully. We blew out this budget by X, Y, Z.
It's constant.
I've been in around enough business projects to see that they never go the way.
Yeah. It's the same as when people renovate their house. They get a quote for $350 and it's $600. Yeah. By the time they're done. Yeah. Like every time.
And they're like, I'm still got to do the landscaping, man.
Yeah.
Fuck.
Yeah, it's interesting, eh? So he reckons this is a problem and the timing is an issue. He didn't say this exactly, but he basically said like interest rates will stay high even if we go into a sort of recession. And he said like collateral damage isn't house prices going down. So like if you think the Reserve Bank is going to come save you in terms of your house price, think again. Collateral damage is like exponential job loss. That's bad, not house prices. Like right now, the house prices are the least of their worries. They're trying to slowly put pressure on the labour market to loosen that up because that's probably one of the biggest drivers of structural inflation at the moment. And then after all of this, after all of the keeping interest rates high, trying to get people unemployed, government fire someone, and he said that the reality is they're probably going to change the bracket, like we've said, from 1% to 3% to 2% to 4%.
Wow, there we go.
Yeah, so he reckons they can't even get it back to between 1 and 2.
Yeah,
effectively, that's what he's saying. Like, you know.
Yeah, when you can't win the game, change the rules, baby.
Yeah, classic government, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, man, really interesting. Sort of half an hour that he spent talking about this stuff.
Did he give any... What I don't like about these economists, there's never any, okay, here's what you should do or what you should be thinking about.
Well, that's not their job.
Gotcha.
Nah.
Yeah, that's why we're here.
Yeah, that's right. Just the fact is earn more money.
Yeah.
But some other interesting stuff is he is probably a little bit like me when he's talking about politics. And he's like, both sides suck.
Yeah.
But interestingly, he went over a few graphs of what people are looking at right now. Now... cost of living, he had a list of the top 5 problems for people ranked from 1 to 5. Cost of living is number 1. And he went through the data and some graphs, and it shows that like the national side of the government are traditionally the ones that handle that thing better, whereas Labour don't. And he said that the other interesting thing is that crime traditionally ranks in New Zealand throughout history outside of the top 5, and it's now number 2.
Sheesh.
So it's on people's minds, and that's also a centre-right problem, so National Act type coalition to sort that out. He didn't say who he thinks going to win the election.
But he's just looking straight at data, basically.
He's just looking at the data being
behaviour.
like, yeah, if this is what people are thinking, that's probably the way the election's going to go.
Yeah. What was number 3?
Oh, they were boring. It was like fucking climate change and shit. Like, I didn't take them down. Yeah. Anytime, fuck, I don't want to start down that road.
3, 4, and 5, Mikey can't remember teams, so
I just thought that was interesting because that's probably the other reason I didn't take the other ones down was because it's probably the ones I hear from real people, not the media and shit, from real people that I talk to on a day-to-day basis. That's what people care about.
Yeah.
I notice it. I don't have conversations with people, like tens of different mortgage meetings per week, and we chat and we talk about things, and it's cost of living and crime, and no one goes, yeah, climate change ranks in front of those things for me. Like day to day, no one talks about number 3. I don't know where they got that data from. Obviously, it's a part of it, but when I talk to real people, crime and cost of living is way above the other ones. So, yeah, and things cost money.
So this could be pointing towards a new blue government in 2023. We'll see. I think that, when all the policies and stuff start coming out from these parties, they'll have to address these top 2 things, right? Because the beauty for politicians now is that they've got data. They can trawl social media and see, they can get a vibe check of the country. What are you commenting? What's the negativity like? What are people thinking and talking about? And then they can shape conversation and communication around alleviating those pain points, which is pretty bloody powerful, especially to sell you into voting for something. But I've noticed more articles as well of people saying, who's the better party of the 2 shit ones, basically, or just things like that.
Well, it's true. They're just shit.
Yeah, what's the best of the worst lot and stuff like this. Where I think a lot of people are sort of sitting there going, I don't know how amazing either side's going to solve this, red versus blue. But as always, we come back to what can we do and what can we be thinking about. And just like my client earlier, they need to be thinking about these things earlier. Yeah, and not leaving the decision and the action till the last minute.
Yeah. I think it's about, like, we've been talking about this stuff coming, and now it seems to be getting closer finally, because we talked about it for a year.
Yeah.
It finally seems to be coming into fruition. But you want to be proactive, and you want to make sure that you're ready to take on maybe, like, if you're a business, a slightly lower income. You've always talked about do your numbers at 80% just in case.
Yep.
Doesn't mean it's going to happen, but it's about protecting the downside.
Yep.
And then you've got, can you handle these expenses going up? So you want to be proactive and make sure that the numbers look okay in your own personal forecast. And, like, I'm a big fan of it because, like, the worst case scenario is you do, like, a year or whatever of personal austerity, and you wake up in a year and you've got more savings. Yep. Like, your business might keep growing and your expenses might not get as high as you forecasted, but all you've done is look after your personal finances more, make sure you've got no personal debts, and then your future and opportunities will grow from there regardless. So it's like it's not a hard thing to do, and there's no real downside to it.
Yeah. I think for a lot of people, they just need to put their hand up and actually ask for some help. I'm doing a money mail this week around where you can go in New Zealand to get help. But someone messaged me on Instagram this week, and they've got $42,000 worth of consumer debt. And I sent you a message about it, and you're like, bro, I see this every day. This is very common. And I said to this person, I sent them like 4 links of things that they could do to get some help. And they're like, cheers, bro. Like, I need to reach out to one of these.
Yeah.
And it's like, yes, you do.
Take action, yeah.
Yeah. Making a decision can be just as impactful as actually getting to the finish line.
It's more.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's more. People were like, if I do a debt consolidation, they start looking for an interest rate that's like 12 versus 13. It's like, no, you're fucked. Like, you need to pay it off. Don't spend the next 5 weeks deciding on which company does your debt consolidation. Just pick one, get the payment going, pay above it.
I looked into that, but I didn't end up deciding on which one.
They were going to charge me a fee. Just crank.
Make it a priority to sort some of this shit out. And whether it's buy now, pay later, like all of that stuff, it's so important to get on top of, and to get on top of before you're in the hurt locker where you've lost your job, your partner has, like, your circumstance change, and that's when you tell everyone, we didn't see this coming. Of course you didn't. Like, we never see emergencies coming. That's why we want to try and tidy this shit up early. And people will say to me on social media, buy now, pay later has actually been really good for me. It's taught me how to save, and it's taught me how to spend and learn about budgeting. I'm like, cool. So how much is in your emergency fund? How much have you got invested? I'm like, go back and compare what you spent on buy now, pay later for the year versus what you've got invested and what you've got in your emergency fund.
Yeah.
And then tell me what it's taught you.
I reckon you triggered a few people when you said, is your credit card limit higher than your savings balance?
I think I saw a few followers unfollow. How dare you?
Yeah.
But it's such a good, that's a good goal, to have a savings balance higher than your buy now, pay later balance. Because all BNPL and consumer debt is doing is encouraging you to spend.
Outside your means.
Yeah. Not to invest, not to save for a rainy day, not to build foundations and help you become a different person. All that buy now, pay later does is facilitate you to become more of the person you know you shouldn't be. To invest, to save, to have an emergency fund, to get all of those things closed and cleared out, you have to become someone else.
Yeah.
And that's hard. And that's why you don't do it. And that's why you hold on to your excuses of why, no, it's so good to have this and to have my credit card limit and all this shit that you probably don't actually need.
Otherwise, you'll end up like Silicon Valley Bank.
Oh, there we go. Great intro. Well, who are they and what happened to them, mate?
Silicon Valley Bank, well, we don't fully know what happened. We'll find out what's going to happen on Monday. But basically, they got liquidated in a bank run on Friday.
So a bank run is, I get whisper that this bank could be getting in trouble, so I shoot down to my local Westpac branch and I'm like, I'm drawing out all my cash.
Yeah, different these days. So effectively, Silicon Valley Bank, clues in the title, it's in Silicon Valley. It's the 16th largest bank in America. And they had $342 billion worth of customer deposits, right? So it's a lot. It's bigger than New Zealand's economy.
Yeah.
And what happened is an equity raise or a cash raise was announced, and they said we're trying to raise liquidity, kind of like what Ryman did, right?
Yeah.
But the problem with that is that being a bank, people were like, why? That's strange. And it triggered the bank run. And a bank run these days can be just transferring out to another bank, or, no one's going to go and be like, I need $300 billion in cash. It's not realistic, but they'll try and move around and stuff. Now, I looked into it a bit and I found out what happened. So basically, everyone's put their money, all these VCs and startups and shit, they all bank through the Silicon Valley Bank. And they have a whole lot of customer deposits on hand. And probably a year or 18 months ago, the banks got all of this cash sitting there at zero, and they went and bought government bonds, which are risk-free assets, basically. They're guaranteed. So they had 3 and 4 year duration terms on these bonds, and the interest rate was about 1.79%.
Just on that, so you lend the money to the government and they pay it back to you plus a
1.9% per year.
But then does the bond move in value as well?
So yeah, this is how this happens. So basically they've got a 3 or 4 year maturity, and bonds are very liquid. It's the most liquid asset in the world. You can always sell them. It's a giant market. It's bigger than the share market. And so you've got this, you can wait out the 3 year maturity date and then get your 1.79% per year paid back plus the initial amount that you bought. So that was $100. You can get that, whatever the 1.79 times 3 is. But if you have to, they are liquid during the period that they are locked up for as well. You can borrow against them or you can sell them. Now, the problem is they got their macro bet wrong because they bought too much of this bond. Interest rates moved up, and now, like the same version of their bond, like call it a 3 year maturity date, you can get a 4 or a 5% interest rate on. So the market is paying the same price for a 4 or 5% interest rate. So to sell the bonds that they have that are paying a 1.79% interest rate, they're worth like 30 cents on the dollar.
Yeah, no one wants them.
So they've got no value, basically. So when all of these startups and stuff are trying to do their payroll, these guys have to sell their bonds, and they're like, oh shit, the bond's worth nothing. And they didn't have any hedges in place to protect themselves. And if they sell the bond, they basically couldn't cover the cost of the deposits. So they went to do a capital raise, and then the capital raise failed, and then it got sniffed out, and everyone went, fuck this, I'm out of here. And they tried to transfer their deposits. Boom, one day it's all over.
Shit. So that's how a bank collapses, just like
That's
that.
how it happens, yeah. So that's probably, it's very different. It's like a VC startup bank. So, like in America, they have what they call FDIC insurance, which is a guarantee from the government that they'll cover $250,000 worth of deposits in an account.
So if I've got 300 grand deposited in there and
you'll get 250 back.
Gotcha.
But
the taxpayer pays for that.
Taxpayers, yeah, basically. So in New Zealand, we have a similar thing, but it's 100 grand, I think.
Yeah.
And the difference for the Silicon Valley Bank, and I don't think the government's going to bail it out. I just don't see how. Like all of the companies that were funding it are these, run on losses for 10-year type startups in Silicon Valley. They're all a load of shit anyway. They need a reset. I think the government won't do it. I think they'll try and push someone like JP Morgan to come along and buy up whatever's left for cents on the dollar, kind of like what they did with Bear Stearns back in 2008. But Actually, JP Morgan got treated pretty badly in that scenario, so they might not do it, but something like that.
I saw Elon might buy. Is that right? I saw
Yeah, well,
it
he
one
could do
time.
it. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but it's a little bit different to how I'm not 100% work on this sure on the structure of how our banks do that stuff. Probably if we had that happen at one bank in New Zealand, we'd be fucked anyway. So
Yeah.
But the problem with the Silicon Valley Bank is because it was these giant VC firms and billionaires funding it and things like this, only 3.5% of deposits were 250 grand or less. So 90% of the funds are uninsured.
Yeah, I saw that.
So that's pretty brutal.
Yeah, they're not going to get the cash back. It's like putting
They'll
money into
probably-
Celsius.
So the issue that, and this is where contagion happens, and it's not going to. I think it's going to be contained in this one. It's not a contagion event. After looking at it, it's just a whole lot of useless, worthless like startups that don't make any fucking money anyway, and they're banking on multiples of like 100 value of their company and shit. It's all
Sell it in
bullshit.
time. Yep. Gee, you're nice to the bloody startups at the moment, Mikey. Good on you.
And shit, you've
Sorry,
lost
mate.
track there. What? So
in New Zealand versus America, yeah, it's a bit different. It's all backed by property here, mate. So they just sell your house and say, yeah, the bank can't fail. And if it is, the government will have to prop it up.
Yeah.
I.e. the taxpayer.
But the problem where the contagion can kick in, and you can see it, is like there are these firms that, like on Monday, they've got $12 million worth of payroll to send out to their staff.
Yeah, it's scary.
And they don't have the money.
So those people could lose
They
their
did
jobs.
have the money, but it's gone. So the staff then walk off, company goes boof. So the flow-on effect of the contagion kicks in, and it's like, oh fuck, this is pretty bad.
I saw an interview with somebody who thought this could be the case. They had a warning sign from basically their CFO, so they pulled all their cash because they were about to make payroll, and they're like, we can't risk this. And so they got all their cash out just in time.
Nice.
Yeah, but there'll be most
heaps
wouldn't
that
have.
didn't though. Yeah. There's some real fishy stuff going on too. Like the CTO of the bank sold $4.5 million worth of shares like a week before and stuff. Like it's fucking dodgy.
That ain't fishy, mate. That is knowing what's about to happen.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean,
but I think for perspective, there's about 500-ish banks in America, right? And if they're the 16th biggest, it's just like another drop in the ocean over there a little bit. But as Mikey says, it could lead to contagion with people. Because I instantly thought, people say cash is king and have an emergency fund and stuff, right? And I'm a big proponent of that. But I don't actually have that much access to cash. It's very minimal. And I said it a long time ago on a pod, very wise to actually have some physical access to cash because you just don't know what happens, but it gives you power should something happen. Now, this is what we saw in the Hawke's Bay, where people were trying to go and buy things. The network was down, right?
Yeah, the ATMs weren't working and stuff. Yeah.
And I do think that this is the biggest risk in the world would be the internet going down and the power going down.
Yeah,
so
with that becomes the breakdown of social cohesion.
And I want to run
trade.
straight to my dairy in that next 2 or 3 hours and go, I'm buying up as much shit. And I know that if I have cash versus someone that's like, I'll give you an IOU, I'm probably going to be allowed to take more to build out a buffer.
Yeah.
So I need to have some access to cash somewhere. And this is then where people go, I'm going to get some access to some gold. And so then they go and get some gold. And I'm in a building where the gold mint is. And I've noticed an increase in people coming, trying to get to it. And even people in the storm and the cyclone, they weren't open. They were waiting at the door downstairs. And I was telling them, they're not open. You can't get there. And they didn't believe me. I could tell. They were like, I'm not leaving. I'm not taking this guy's word for it. It's really interesting.
Gold people are the end of the world is.
Wow. But I guess one of the other things, mate, that we know we'll see more of in the back end of this year is two things. Above, below the line. So some people that will take ownership, accountability, responsibility, and then other people that will go blame, excuse, deny.
Well, 100%. I've already seen big billionaire VC guys on Twitter and YouTube and stuff talking about the breakdown of this bank, and they're already blaming it on the Federal Reserve. But they're not going like, oh, actually, Silicon Valley Bank got a trade wrong on a bond. That's their problem. They didn't protect their downside. They took a risk and they put zero into hedging it, and now they fucked it up. Like, they don't have control over what the Fed does with interest rates. So I'm seeing billionaires blame, excuse, deny. It's probably because they've got a fuck ton of money in this bank.
Yeah.
So they're pretty upset. But, exactly what you say all the time. Like, you have to look at it and be like, shit, didn't do my DD properly, did I?
Yeah.
Take responsibility, move on, next one, don't make the mistake again.
Yeah, get hurt quickly, work through the pain, and carry on. the longer you stay like in the blame, excuse, deny, the harder life is, and it flows over to other areas of your life. And that's where it becomes draining. You become drained. You start draining other people. Other people get frustrated by you. I hear this from clients where some of them are doing well, but they might work in an office where others aren't, and they're like, I can't go there as much anymore because it's bringing me down. And we spoke about it in another pod where someone who's been through the GFC, they said to me, man, the hardest thing is just watching some of your friends and stuff become different people because they get burnt.
Yep.
And you're still doing well because you've done all this work to try and protect yourself and get ahead, and they start to envy you or get frustrated by you, and you have these fractious relationships and stuff. So we have to get ourselves ready for the fact that it could be draining, and we want to try and get ourselves ready earlier rather than waiting until we're forced to.
Yeah, man. I think it's interesting, right? Like we haven't seen a bank go down for a while.
No.
So
this is the biggest one since the GFC, this SVB.
Yeah. And I also think it is nothing like the GFC as well. So don't be worried about it. I think there'll be bad news and people yelling and screaming for like 3 or 4 weeks, and then everyone would have forgotten about it.
Yeah, probably 72 hours.
I remember in 2020 when I was like digging into the evergreen thing with the property development over in China. Fuck, haven't heard from it since. I thought it was going to be gigantic.
I was thinking about the same thing the other day too.
Yeah, so it's just not on that scale, and it's not on the scale of the GFC. The GFC was far, far larger than that.
Yeah.
Over time, we might have another GFC, but this is not the first cause. This is just the cracks showing because of interest rate hikes and how fast they've happened. And we'll probably see more little bits and pieces similar to that, and we'll see it in personal lives, so you've got to protect your own.
Yep.
You know, interest rates increasing, fucked this bank. So it can happen to you too with your personal bank, you know, like your own home and your own assets and liabilities and everything. So do the numbers, work it out. No blame, excuse, deny.
Yeah.
You know, what is it? Ownership, accountability, responsibility.
Bingo.
Stay above the line.
Yeah.
And get it sorted and make sure you're on the right track and don't be SVB.
One of the podcasts that is flying at the moment, mate, is just getting heaps of traction, is the interview I did with Logan Donnelly around thrifting and trying to find ways to save money. Because I know as much as we talk about trying to earn more money, there's a lot of people that are just like, I can't do that. They don't have that paradigm yet. They don't believe that's possible. It's too hard. They don't know where to start. They don't want to put themselves out there. But decreasing your expenses are an easy thing for everyone to have a crack at.
I also believe that you should crack that first. You need to get into that zone and get down to, like, I had to do that. I had to go down to, like, drop my expenses as low as I could before I, like, started eating rice only.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's what I went to. And then from there, I was like, I can't improve this anymore. Time to go the other way.
Exactly.
That was just personal for me. I had to do that.
Yeah. I mean, same thing for me. Okay, what expenses can I cut out? Okay, I might have to move home again. Okay, how long is that going to take? Okay, I might have to travel for 2 to 3 hours every day again. I might have to sacrifice some sleep. And then eventually I used that period to then get out the other side. And the first thing I did when I started making money again, cool, I'm going to buy my time back. I'm going to spend it on an apartment. People are like, that is the fucking stupidest thing I've ever seen. I'm like, no, because I've done my time of losing sleep, of the grind, of trying to get to the gym by 5, to beat the traffic, all this stuff. And now I'm like, okay, I'm going to make more money to change my life in a different direction by buying back my time, because I know I can create more value with the time that I get. But for a lot of people, you might want to go back and listen to that podcast with Logan around exactly how he cut out about $5,000 worth of different expenses, and those things are always changing as well, and our situations are too. So I think to take control back, you want to just be taking some form of action, and it's not just listening to a podcast. It's then, great, what's one thing I may do? And it could even just be opening a savings account and setting up an automatic payment into it, or an emergency fund, and doing something so you know that you've actually taken action to become a different person to who you are before you take those actions.
Yeah, I was having a conversation with someone the other day, and researching and listening to stuff like this is part 1, and there's like 3 parts, and part 1 does not help you get to the goal. You need it, like you need to learn and figure out and research and get things in place. Then part 2 is taking action, and then 3 to actually hit the goals is just action times 5. So doing more and more and more.
Yeah.
So
and cutting out. You start to, as you do more of the things that you know work, you start to realize the things that aren't working. You cut those back.
Yeah, 100%.
Rightio, so get ready for June, July, people, or September, October, who knows. But the back end of this year is going to be very different to how it currently is.
Yeah, I think so. Just the numbers that are stacking up, even the savings rates and stuff in the US, it looks like it's on track to really hit pretty much zero and be in
Yep.
in 100% debt mode again by August time. So all of those things, when I look at them, seem to be converging. I don't have access to the most Gucci data, but just the basics, it looks like it's like around then, more or less.
And Kiwis will do the same. They'll use credit cards to pay for their buy now, pay later. Or like they won't pay their buy now, pay later, but then they'll increase their credit card spending as well, just to carry on the lifestyle that they've got, instead of going, right, bang, I'm sticking a fork in this and I'm figuring out I'm at a fork in a road moment and I need to change the way I'm going. Because the way I'm currently going, I'm just contributing to these statistics.
That's it, mate. Exciting times, eh?
Well, the good thing is people have still got time. They've still got time to make some changes to try and, by the time we get to the back end of this year, to go like, I knew it was going to be like this. So you've got a chance to feel like you're a bit more in control. But the longer you leave it, the harder it's going to get. You know, we saw this week, Xero internationally lay off 700 to 800 people. It's 15% of their workforce.
Big company.
Company.
Pretty much not a monopoly, but the gangsters of the industry.
Big time. Yeah.
So, and big boys.
Yeah. And look, if they can do it, you know, just do not be surprised if you, by the end of this year, if you know someone who has lost their job. They may find another job, but
it's actually better to lose your job now and be able to find one now while they're still around, because eventually those job openings won't exist if they keep jacking rates and putting the pressure on. Yeah,
and we've spoken about it before. We're a bit sick. We will put ourselves in our heads into situations and think, okay, how would I act if I end up in that? You may want to do that. You may want to role play your income being cut, or you're going back to 4 days a week, or your partner losing their role, or even you doing it and just thinking, okay, what would I do if I ended up in that situation? And remember, humans are very resilient. They'll normally find a way. And it could be, you know, that you can lean on your parents, for instance, or you would, I had a conversation with someone yesterday, and they leveraged off their apartment to buy the perfect home that they wanted and all that sort of stuff. Interest rates have gone up, and now they're just like, you know what, we have to sell one of them, so we've got to sacrifice and decide which one do we let go of. So you've got to start scenario planning for yourself. Okay, what would you do should the world not be the way that you expect it to be, or that it currently is?
Yeah, I also think it is a time for pulling the trigger and making decisions.
Yeah,
like there's not, it's not a time to be like, we'll worry about this in 2024. I think it's like, take it seriously, look at figures, use logic, remove emotion, make some decisions, move on. And like, I do always say to people, like when people are like compromising when they're buying their first home, they're like, oh, I would really like the bit of land. I'm like, it's your first home, not your last home.
Nice.
And it's the same if you've got something at the moment and it's not working out with interest rates. It's like, it doesn't mean you can't buy it in 4 years again.
Yeah.
Like think about the pros and cons. Like do a list. Be like, should we go renting for 4 years? I do it, and it's not that bad, guys.
Same here.
Yeah. So like, it's still a house. You know, and you might not need to do this, but just think about it with logic and process it, and be like, will this help me secure the future I want in 5 years or whatever? And just make those decisions. It's time for decisions.
FYI, mate, I was looking at a $10 million property in Takapuna last night on Trade Me.
What does that rent for?
No, you get to buy it.
Oh, really?
Yeah, no. Like Taz and I were just looking at what houses are for sale over there at the moment. And there's quite a few close to the water, but there was one there for 10 milli. I'm like, wow, that's what a $10 million home looks like.
Well, with climate change, the big boys probably know that they won't be insured pretty soon. So
that's exactly what I was thinking. I thought, I wonder if this value will actually come down. Yeah. And we said the same thing. Like, I wonder if they get insurance.
Yeah. But, if you've got enough money, you can insure anything.
That's right.
Yeah. If you're worried about it,
you'll find somebody. Yeah, that's willing to take the risk.
Yeah.
Okay, mate, another cracking episode. That sets the scene for our Sunday. As always, you like this tune, mate, to get us going?
I love this banger, eh?
Yeah, did you pick this up from TikTok, maybe?
Nah, from Too Fast, Too Furious, the movie.
Oh,
Gangster
nice.
movie, one of my faves.
There we go. Well, look after yourselves out there, people. Actually, what?
Oh, Tokyo Drift. Just two great movies.
There you go. If you want a list of Mikey's favourite movies, drop him a line on Instagram.